Welcome back, everybody. In this week's video, we are going to cover 5 common wheel throwing mistakes and issues that beginners encounter and tips and tricks on how to solve them. So if that's something that you want to see, stick around and find out how we do it. So in this week's video, we're going to cover 5 common mistakes and issues that wheel throwers go through, and we are going to troubleshoot them and hopefully help understand why they happen and how to prevent them from happening. And we're going to use unwedged clay straight from the bag so you can see that you really don't need to wedge the clay if it's brand new. And so the one thing that I recommend doing, if it's straight from the bag, cut it into these cubes and then just gently start tapping it on the surface. And this will help waken up those clay particles, and it'll get the clay much softer than it was previously. And then you take the corners, tap that in. And apologies outside, there are some people loading and unloading a tractor trailer. And then we are ready to get started on throwing. Alright, so we got our ball. Let's go ahead and get this centered real quick. Roll it around like a joystick. Tap. Compress. And let's start sealing the edge. Okay, push down first. Then cone up. And the cone down. And I squeeze the sides with my sponge hand, my right hand. And then we got it ready to start pulling our walls up. So dig our well. Make sure I don't go too deep. So I want to keep about 1/2 inch of clay at the bottom. And then I'm going to go ahead and start opening. And so I'm going to open. And before I actually squeeze and do the first pull, I'm going to talk about the first common mistake that students make and beginners make in pulling their walls. So the first mistake is that they pull the walls too fast. And the rule of thumb when you pull is you have to make sure that your hands stay at that specific height for at least one full rotation of the wheel before it can move up in height. So one way to tell how fast you're pulling is you usually leave something, I'm just doing this for example, something behind. In this case, this is called throw lines. And the farther apart the lines are, the faster you're moving your hand. The closer they are, the slower you're moving your hand. So depending on how fast you spin your wheel will dictate how fast you need to pull. And if you pull too fast and your lines are very spaced apart, you're going to get an uneven clay distribution. And I'll show you what that means and what it looks like. So let's say we spin at about medium speed, we compress, and then we just pull really fast. Now that looks really cool, the spirals look awesome, but clay thickness wise, it's not even. My top got a little uneven, you can see it rising and fall, and then these spirals are just very pronounced. So if I were to continue throwing and I pull that fast, the clay will get more uneven, and as I'm pulling, I'm going faster in height than the wheel is spinning, so I'm distributing the clay unevenly. So this side most likely will be thicker than this side, or thinner than that side, so vice versa. So as you guys are throwing and you keep getting taller, the clay will become more and more uneven. So when you pull, you want to make sure that your throw lines are not so separate, at least as you're learning to throw. And then if you want to purposely make these spirals later, that's something you can do after. So when you pull, once again, left hand in, right hand out, I push out, then I push in, and then I pull. And when I pull, I'm pulling slower so that these throw lines are less pronounced and more compact against each other. So let's go ahead and start to pull. I push out, I push in, and I'm moving nice and slow. And as I do that, all that unevenness, all those throw lines that I had before will start to even out. And then when I get to the top, another tip that I have is stay there for a few seconds, let the clay catch up to your movements, and then release away. Now, because I did 2 pulls unevenly and fast, you can see that my rim is rising and falling and it's a little uneven. And there's a lot of extra slip here. So I have the next 2 tips, one after the other here. After every few pulls, you want to compress your lip. And when you compress your lip, you compact the clay particles into a more dense lip and dense part, and that will allow you to stretch and compress the clay. So open and close the clay without the clay getting wrinkled or that scalloped edge. So to compress the lip, the way that I like doing it, I take my left hand, I have my left pointer finger on the inside at 6 o'clock, my left thumb on the outside at 6 o'clock, and make sure that it's wet enough where you don't feel it drag. So let's dip it in the water a little more. And then I use the bottom of my right finger to close down and compress the lip so that it's like a parking gate. And as I close and compress, it's going to be up against these 2 fingers, so they are together as a unit. And I'm going to push down until this little lip here, this sharp part, compresses and becomes flat. And I'll collect all the clay that's not attached. So it looks something like this. So light pressure, I'm not squeezing, I'm just there as a guide. Push down, and I'm just pushing until that lip is more or less flat. And all the slip and clay that was not attached to the rim comes off, and I can move that to the side. So that is compressing your lip. And as you pull, I'm going to actually thin this out even more so you can see the benefit of it. So I'm going to pull and make this really thin. I'm going to pinch and pull. And as I pinch and pull and it gets really thin, if I were to then bring this clay in, it may start wrinkling on itself. So let's actually thin it out a little more. So as I thin it out and I start trying to push it in, you'll see right there that bump is going to start to wrinkle. And that's because that rim is very thin and not compressed. So if we just push down on it and really realign the particles, it thickens it up. I can now bring it in even tighter without it wrinkling on itself. So I'm going to bring it back. And I'm going to show you another quick technique on how to help your rim when it's thin. So tip number 2 was to compress the lip, so to get those clay particles nice and thick. And the next one is to how to bring the clay in and out when you have a really thin lip. So if you have a really thin lip like this, and you want to bring it in, most likely when you bring it in, let's see if it happens. You see that it starts to wrinkle, and then it's going to scallop on itself and then fold into itself. So to help combat that, we're going to bring the clay back out. And the reason why that happens, it's too thin, and so as you bring it in, the clay can't really get sucked back into itself, and it causes it to do that weird wrinkle and twist. So first step, try to compress to thicken that lip up. And when you bring it in, you want to have something over, a thumb over or a finger over, to compress the lip as you're bringing it in, so it compacts it as it goes tighter. So there's 2 ways to do it. One is the easier method, is you use your thumb, you go over the top like this, both thumbs, and then you go in nice and slow. And if you're compressing down on it, the rim shouldn't wrinkle because you're compressing down and moving it in at the same time. And when you bring it out, if you do the compression, like how we talked about before, and then you move it out, it will help keep those particles aligned. And you can see that my rim is actually thicker because as I was compressing, I was bringing it in and bringing it out, distributing that thin clay around and thickening up the whole thing. The other method is a little more awkward because you're going to slip a finger on like this, and then this middle finger and this thumb is going to wrap around the clay like you're holding a bottle just with these hands. You could also do it with your right hand, or you could do it with both hands. So same thing, you're compressing down on the lip with the pointer finger over and you're moving in. So with one hand it looks something like this.
If you're enjoying these videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. That way it helps to grow this little channel and you can see the videos being released every week.
Okay, you just bring it back out. With 2 hands it looks like this. If you want to go more, you can try to hold it like this between these hands. Instead of wrapping around, you're more compact like this, like you're pinching. And this is just as a guide, and you go inward. So that also works. And what this does is this helps you collar really tight without it collapsing on itself. So if I push this bottom section in to make it more straight, and then I compress inward, and these fingers are there to hold, I can really get a nice tight opening. But if you don't want that and you want to open it back up, I like doing a compression here, and then I'm just pulling the clay outwards. So a really cool way to play with the clay to get that rim to be able to do what you want it. And it all is hinged on the rim thickness and compressing the rim and holding it as you go in and out. All right, the next thing, if you tried that and it keeps scalloping on you because the rim is just too thin and you just can't get it because every time you do it, it just folds in itself, most likely it's because the clay is too thin and you can't really do anything because the clay is just too weak. So right here, it's super thin. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. Another way to try to fix it is you actually fold the clay over and then you reattach it back to the clay body. Now the hard part about this is you may trap air and that create a little air pocket and you're gonna have to pop it. But if you do it successfully, you can thicken your rim without having to cut anything off. So I'm gonna add a little water to make it nice and hydrated. So this is a little more in the advance, but if you can get it down as a beginner, you're gonna really open up your throwing abilities. So this is the area that's really thin. I wanna fold this down about halfway so that I can fold it back into this section right here. So the first thing I do is I put my finger where I want the fold to be, and I start pushing the clay out, nice and slow. Okay, it's gonna get really flat. And then from here, I'm just pinching the clay down, making sure I push all the air out, and then I'm going nice and slow until I go all the way down. And then all that excess clay, it's going to either blend or rip off or both. So right there, that's not part of the clay. Let's get that removed. And now my rim is a little thicker and I feel a slight air pocket, so I'm going to push down a little more, push that air out. And now my rim is a little thicker without having to cut. Now it did shrink in height, of course, because we had to fold it, but I have the same amount of clay to work with. And then if I wanted to do the collar, same thing. Wrap my hand on top. So I like the thumb technique. I feel like I have more control, and then I just bring it in. Okay, starting to bend a little bit, and then you see there's a little wrinkles on it. Just really hold the clay and compress, and then those wrinkles will then melt away. All right, and now my rim is nice and level again because I was able to fold it in itself, and then I can continue throwing. When you pull the walls up and it twists in the middle. So let's see if I can get it to do it on purpose. So we'll go ahead and do the pull. And normally when this pull occurs, it's because you're going really thin and you're squeezing really hard. So right there, you can start seeing that twist occur, this little ripple. And so the reason why that happens is two reasons, and kind of like the same way we talked about on the top where it just crumpled. Number one is as you're pulling, you're applying heavy pressure from the start all the way to your top, and it's starting to twist. And so that pressure that you're applying as you go up is causing this top section to slow down in rotational speed, and this bottom section is still spinning at the same speed, causing them to then start twisting. That paired with a thin wall will always lead you into a twist. So the way to prevent that from happening is the number one rule when you pull your walls up is as you start from the bottom, you're going to apply the most pressure, and as you work your way up to the top, you're decreasing the pressure as you rise. And that's something that you want to get used to as you throw, and it really compounds even more when you start throwing much taller because all that weight at the top is bearing down, and if you have a thin spot and you're not releasing the pressure, it will always twist on you. So to fix it, like I said, make sure that you release the pressure as you rise. Once you have the twists occur, just like how we fixed the top, the easiest way to do it is even before I get the rib and I start compressing, I use my left pointer finger and I push that bump out a little bit, And then my right hand is just there to kind of help realign that wobble. And just by doing one pass, it's already getting a little more even. And then I take my rib, and then I do the same thing, but this time using the rib on my outside, and then very light pressure, and my inside hand very light pressure, and then I work my way up. And then it should reduce that wobble on the outside. Now on the inside, you can still see some twist occur, like right there. And so to fix that, as I am doing more pulls, I could then smooth it out, or I take the rib and then I just compress that as well. So a lot of these twists, they're definitely thin spots, but they're more or less cosmetic. As long as you can smooth them out and you can't see them, you can have your piece survive, but they are going to be thin in that spot. So the chances of them breaking after during the trimming or the glazing or when they're finished increase a little bit. So in general, you want to avoid thinning the clay that much. And a good rule of thumb, 1/4 inch is like the perfect thickness because it has lightness, but it also has integrity. All right, so let's go ahead and throw this a little taller so I can go over the next common mistake that students go through. So once again, let's pull it slowly. So push out, push in, and then nice and slow pull. You can see my throw lines are very compact. Going a little too fast with the wheel speed, so I'm going to slow that down. And then I'm actually going to increase the pressure here. So I'm going to increase the pressure and then watch what happens below where I'm working. So right there, I squeezed too hard and the clay collapsed on itself because it got too thin. So the reason why this happened, 2 reasons. Number 1, the clay was getting a little thin, and so it couldn't support the pressure that I was applying. And 2, the pressure that I was applying caused this clay to slow down in rotational speed, whereas the clay below it kept going at the same speed, causing it to then twist on itself and then crumple. So to fix that, the easiest way is just to cut the whole thing off, and then you have a shorter piece to work with. And what I'm doing, I'm just taking the water out. Or the second way is try to compress the clay and use that same rim technique to go in and out to bring it back to life. So this is more of an advanced technique, but if you can master this, it's going to really help you save clay and pieces. So the first thing that I want to do is I pulled and lifted the clay up, and it's super thin here. It's like that thin. So the first thing that I want to do is push the clay out. So now it's counterintuitive, but if you push the clay out, you can realign those clay particles. And I'm going to be doing something called a centering pull. So I'm going to pull the clay up and then gently apply pressure as I pull. So I'm going to shift my hand so you can see it a little better. Gently apply pressure as I pull. And when I get to the rim, I'm going to leave it there and let the wheel do the work. I'm just going to compress the clay there and then let it match the shape that I'm providing it. Okay. Now, if I try to compress the lip here, most likely this will squish on itself because this is starting to twist. So to fix that, same thing. I'm going to push the clay out just a little bit. And then I'm going to push it back in. So if you have tools like a rib, this is where the rib will come into play. So let me grab mine and show you how I get rid of these wobbles. So if you take your rib and then you just use this to apply pressure, you can then compress the clay into it with your inside hand and then really even out those wobbles. And so when you use the rib, there's little holes for your fingers to go into. And I don't like going straight up against the wall perpendicular to the curve. I like angling it towards myself, applying pressure at 3 o'clock. And then my inside hand is just gently supporting it like this. And these two will compress the clay, not too much, but just enough to kind of redistribute the clay and to even it out. So I'm going to start at the bottom here. I'm going to push that clay wall in. My left hand on the inside is gently pushing out. And then I'm slowly going to lift up and then travel through that really thin spot. Okay, so this thin spot right here is an area that I really have to be careful with because odds are if I try to push it out, pull anymore, it's going to crumple again. So I was able to bring this back, but you can see my lip is now uneven and it's starting to collect slip again. So we're going to go back to the beginning tips we talked about, and we're going to compress the lip. That will collect all the slip that's not needed. If it's still a little uneven, it rises and falls, then we just should try cut it off completely.
The main reason why you want to cut your rim is for trimming. So if your rim is uneven and you want to trim it, when you flip it upside down, it won't be flat, and your foot, when you trim, will be uneven.
When we cut from the highest point, this is it's not too unlevel, but I recommend going about a 1/4 inch down because that will give you more meat for the needle to stick and cut into. And so the way that I like cutting, I don't like stabbing it forward because oftentimes you end up stabbing high or low, and then you get a more uneven lip again. So I always try to cut at 3 o'clock, and then my left pointer finger is going to be supporting the inside wall because as I cut in and push in from the side, the clay is going to then get flexed like that. So my pointer finger is going to help prevent that. And when I'm cutting, I'm aiming the tip of the needle into the side of my pointer finger. So I cut across like this. And then when I hold the tools, I connect my left thumb onto the needle itself, and then I use that as a pivot point so I can open and close it like it's a door. And then my wrist, I got to make sure that it's level and parallel to the ground. And then if you want, you can take your elbow, suck it up into your body, or put it on your knee. In this case, it's harder because my wheel's higher, so I could put it on the flash pan if I want. But I'm going to float it because we're used to that. Dip my finger into the water, support the clay wall, and the first thing that you do is you're going to score a line all the way around. Once that line is scored, you then push the needle into that line until it touches your inside finger. So I don't recommend pulling it out like how I did. So you go back and you do this all at the same time. Score the line and keep pushing until it touches your pointer finger. Once you feel it touch, lift up, and you should create a nice even cut rim. And then if it bent a little bit, kind of play with that rim a little bit more, and then use your sponge to add a little bit of water so that you get it nice and even. I hope you folks enjoyed these tips and tricks to fix some common issues that you most likely have encountered or will encounter through your throwing adventures. And so if you like these kind of tips and tricks and you feel like it's helping you, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps grow this channel, and it helps me to then share this information to more people. If you have any other issues that you guys commonly face as you throw, let me know in the comments below, and then I can make another video to address and fix those as well. So with that being said, as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.